objective at the center is to answer the same question that was asked by Adam Smith. Okay, Adam Smith asked the question, what's the secret of the wealth of nations? And obviously he answered it completely. When Adam Smith was alive and when he published his book, the richest country in the world at the time, in terms of income per capita, which was probably the Netherlands, was about 4 times richer than the poorest country in the world. So that after he published his book, the world read the book and the problem went away, right? So that now the poorest countries in the world are these countries here, say the Congo. If you multiply by 4 the income per capita of the poorest countries in the world, you get to Haiti. If you multiply by 4 the income of Haiti and Kenya, you get to Ecuador. If you multiply by 4 the income of Ecuador, you get to Mexico or Chile. If you multiply by 4 the income of these countries, you get to Australia or Belgium, and they're still richer countries. So a problem that was a problem of 4 to 1 became a problem of hundreds to 1. So this huge increase in income inequality, if you want, between countries. So the problem that Adam Smith identified did not go away. It became that much bigger. Now, this is not only true at the level of countries, it's also true within countries. If you look, for example, in Mexico, the state of Guerrero has a productivity per worker which is similar to that of Honduras. If you multiply by 2 the state of Guerrero, you get to Sinaloa, which is like Jamaica. If you multiply by 2 the state of Sinaloa, you get to Guanajuato, which is like Malaysia. And you multiply by 2 Guanajuato, you get to Nuevo León, which is the state where the city of Monterrey is, which has a productivity that is higher than that of Korea. So we have these incredible phenomena of enormous disparities in productivity and incomes per capita, even across countries, within countries. That means that for some reason, people work with amazingly different productivity levels. And you see people work in agriculture in amazingly different productivity levels. I'm going to come back to this picture in a few slides to try to make sense of why this happens. Why would you do things this way if it's so much cooler to do it this way? You know, this guy even inside here has an air conditioning. So now, 2 things very importantly happened since Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. The first one is that there was an explosion of income in today's rich countries. Incomes per capita in the US have gone up by a factor of 25 relative to the time when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. So that's a phenomenon, we call it the Great Acceleration. And the second thing that happened is that this did not happen at the same time across the world. In some parts of the world, say the US and Canada, it happened faster than it did, say, in Africa. So a difference of 4 to 1 back here became a difference of hundreds to 1. So that's what we call the Great Divergence. The question is, what is behind this Great Divergence? And, you know, we just saw Zanny Minton Beddoes saying, well, obviously, if you're going to talk about inequality, let's talk about schooling. It's all about schooling, right? Well, if you, for example, looked at the distribution of countries in the world in 1970, you know, the rich were educated and the poor were not educated. This is income per capita, this is years of schooling, right? So if you want to become richer, you have to get more educated. Now this was done in 1970, so you might ask yourself what might have happened since 1970. Maybe, you know, since 1970, if you had the same level of schooling, now you have cell phones and computers and the internet and antibiotics and a bunch of other things. So you should be able to achieve as much as you did in 1970 plus something, right? Well, let's look at what happened since 1970. Well, actually what happened is that the world moved in the opposite direction. So that in 1970, countries that had average years of schooling of 10,000, average years of schooling of 6 years in their labor force had an average income per capita of 10,000. Today, countries that have 6 years of schooling in their labor force have an average income per capita of 1,000. So the world got more educated, it did not get richer. In fact, you see everybody sort of is moving up, they're not moving along the line that was there in 1970. So the world became more educated, it did not become richer. This is another way of looking at the same thing. This is income per capita and years of schooling. Here is Ghana. At 7 years of schooling, Ghana had an income per capita of 1,000. Thailand at 6,700. Mexico at 10,000, and France at 21,000. So at the same level of schooling, if you want, and if you controlled for quality and so on, it would change a little bit, but not much. You have differences of income per capita of a factor of 20. So the notion that it was all about schooling, I think it's not in the data. The world has already tried that experiment. It's also not about urbanization. Same story with urbanization. The world became more urbanized. It did not become much richer because of that. So this is another way of looking at it. If we compare, say, a developing or emerging market country, not a bad one, a good one, say like Turkey, and you compare Turkey in 2010 to Netherlands in 1960, that's a 50-year period. All the indicators of Turkey in 2010 are better than the indicators in the Netherlands. They're more urbanized, they have fewer children, they get more schooling, more of them finish high school, more of them complete higher education, etc., etc. Moreover, in 2010, Turkey has cell phones, computers, the internet, technology, etc. So you could say with better social indicators and 50 years newer technology, they should be able to produce more. Well, income per capita in Turkey is half what it was in the Netherlands in 1960. So there's something weird that is missing in this story, and it is very big. It is very big. It's not okay. Now, what is it? Well, economists have a good name to call their ignorance. They call it technology. So if none of the above, that's the definition of technology. But in essence, if you push an economist to tell you what do you mean by technology, he will say, well, it's either a set of tools, instruments, stuff, right? Or it's a set of ideas, blueprints, rules, no? So it's either tools or ideas. Now, tools, you can ship around. And ideas, you can put on the web, right? So for example, if your tooth hurts, you download an article from the web, you make your significant other read it, right? And they'll fix your teeth, right? Not quite, right? You need to go to somebody who actually understands whatever is in this Wikipedia entry, right? So besides tools and besides ideas, there's something that we're going to call collective know-how. And that collective know-how is our story of what is really underlying this underlying puzzle. And understanding what this substance is, how it moves, how you can capture it, how you can promote it, is what is core to our research idea. So know-how is the competence to perform a task. It's a competence to perform a task. It's like riding a bicycle or playing tennis. It's a competence to perform a task. That's what know-how is. Know-how does not involve comprehension. So it's not like if Rafa Nadal, he knows how to answer a serve. He doesn't know how it is and what he does to answer a serve. He just knows how to do it. So he doesn't comprehend what it is that he does. He knows how to do it, but he doesn't comprehend. And if he were to put it in words and tell it to you, I don't think it'll change your game much, right? Know-how is, if you want, a wiring of the brain. It's not a set of ideas that are easily communicable and so on. It's a wiring of the brain. Now, collective know-how gets a little bit more complicated. Collective know-how is the competence to perform a task that cannot be done by an individual. So, for example, like, say, play a symphony. Cannot be done by an individual. Or, play a team sport, or make the trains run on time. Right? It involves a whole set of complementary people that know about different things, that know about violins, trombones, violas, whatever. Different skills that get mixed into doing things. So let me ask you a rhetorical question. I'm going to compare two people. And to ask you who has more know-how. Here you have, say, an Inuit, and here's the Inuit engaged in food production, and here's the Inuit engaged in housing construction, and here's the Inuit engaged in transportation. And I'm going to ask, who has more know-how? The Inuit or modern man? Now, this guy, you know, he uses glasses, doesn't know how to make glasses. He uses shirts and ties, doesn't know how to make either. He uses a computer, no clue on how this is done. He uses software, never wrote a line of code. You put this guy here, he'll freeze to death. If he doesn't freeze to death, he'll soon enough starve to death, right? There is no practical way in which you can say that this man has no more know-how than this man, right? But there is a sense in which you can say that the society to which this man belongs knows how to do more things than the society to which this man belongs, right? Not because this guy knows more individually, which is what we were measuring with years of schooling and stuff, but because in this society there's a much deeper division of labor. There's a much deeper division of know-how, so that people know very different things, and they rely on the know-how of others to do things, right? And therefore, we all feel so incompetent. We don't know. We all feel that we don't know how to do anything, right? So at least that's what my wife always tells me. So one way to bring this idea together that things are done with know-how, and know-how is something, and the division of know-how is something that is key to economic development, we've developed this metaphor of the Scrabble theory of development. Now, where things are made like, things are like words, and they're made by putting letters together, okay? So if you have little know-how, well, say one letter, you can make one word. Say, if I give you these 3 letters, you can make 4 words, and you can make 3-letter words. If I give you a 4th letter, you can make these 8 words, and you can make 4-letter words. So as I give you more letters, you can make more words, 1, 3, 8, right? And longer words. If I give you these 10 letters, you can make, according to the website of Scrabble, you can make 595 words. And you can make longer words. So as you increase the variety of know-how, you increase the diversity of production and the complexity of production. The diversity is the number of different words you can make. The complexity is how long are those words. Okay? And that is the margin on which this development process is happening. So the world is made out of products that require different amounts of know-how. For example, this family, Ecuadorian family, made all these products that are here. So you can assume that the know-how necessary to make these products resides in that family. No family can make these products. And no country can make this product. This product actually requires a whole network of companies that are global and are all over the place to make one airplane, just to make one airplane, okay? So the notion is the complexity of production is this adding up of know-how of very different kinds. So the fundamental difference between this way of doing agriculture and this way of doing agriculture is that this guy knows how to create his own power, his own tools, his own fertilizer, his own seeds. This guy doesn't know how to make his seeds, doesn't know how to make his fertilizer, doesn't know how to make the tractor, doesn't know how to make gasoline. He relies on a lot of other know-how that is somewhere else. So the fundamental difference, if you want, is in the amount of know-how you're mobilizing. That is the driver of this whole story, at least according to the story that we're trying to say. So we have managed, we have developed a way to bring this into practice, and what we will try to do in the remaining of our time is to show you the tools that we have developed to bring this into practice. We've developed a website to answer practical questions. Marcela Escobari is going to introduce us to that website. And then we're going to use the website. We have some some CID fellows distributed in the room. They'll help you by accessing the website for you to answer the questions. But let me tell you how it is that we transform this intuition into a tool. Okay? First, you notice that, as I said before, if a country has more letters, it should be more diversified. It should be able to make more words. And we can look at how diversified our country is. If a country has more letters, it can make longer words. But longer words can only be made by the countries that have all the letters. So the longer the word, the harder it is to make a letter, the fewer other countries will be able to make that letter. Okay? That word. When we look at the data, that's exactly what we find. We find the rich countries here making a lot of products, very diversified, and products that few other countries are able to make. And the poor countries are all here. They make few products, and products that everybody is able to make. So this negative relationship that we find here, we also find within countries. This is within the US, at the county level, or within Mexican cities. So at whatever granularity you look at, the more letters you have, the more words you make, and the harder the words you can make. Okay? We use these principles to calculate essentially how many letters a country has. How complex is its economy? How much know-how resides on the network of people and firms that are in that society? And lo and behold, we found that after you control for natural resources, countries that have more letters are richer. So if you have more variety of know-how in your country, you're richer. And you might say, well, you know, that's a pretty good relationship, but Professor Hausmann, this R squared is only 0.73. What about the rest? No, there must be something wrong with your theory. But, you know, if I were Argentinian, I would say, there's nothing wrong with my theory. There's something wrong with the world. Because you say, well, what is India doing down here? India should be up here. Given all the letters they have, they should be up here. Well, maybe that's why India has been growing so fast lately. But what is Greece doing up there? Given how little Greece knows, Greece should be down there. Greece should not be up here. Well, guess what? You know, Greece is obliging. So the idea is that this error, and quote-unquote error in the theory, is no such error. It's informative of the capacity of countries to grow. Countries that are below the regression line tend to grow faster. Countries that are above the regression line tend to grow more slowly. Because in the end, how rich you will be in the long run depends on the amount of know-how that resides in the networks of people in your society. So then our problem becomes a very simple problem. We need to get more letters. But getting more letters is a complicated thing because it faces a chicken and egg problem in the sense that you cannot make watches without watchmakers. You cannot make the word without the appropriate letters. But you don't want to become a watchmaker in a country that doesn't make watches. And even if you wanted to become a watchmaker in a country that doesn't make watches, you wouldn't have other watchmakers to learn from. So how are you going to become a watchmaker if there are no watchmakers around? And even if, you know, by a fluke, if you became a watchmaker, maybe the industry requires more than watchmakers. It may require precision machinists or other people and so on. So it is a problem for societies to increase the variety of letters that they have because it will always face this chicken and egg problem. So the way societies, we say, have been able to deal with this problem is by moving towards products that are sort of nearby, that there are not too many letters away, so that the chicken and egg problem that they need to address is more manageable. And to clarify that, we developed this concept of the product space. The product space is like is a map of a forest where every product or every industry is like a tree. And trees are in the forest in proportion to how similar are the letters that they use, how similar are the productive capabilities that they require. So this is our map of the forest. And this forest, every circle here is a tree. Marcela is going to go further into this. But you see that this forest is pretty irregular. This stuff here is textiles, this is construction materials, this is machinery, chemicals, electronics, and then there's a big empty periphery. products differ a lot, not only in terms of how many letters they require, machinery requiring more letters, but also in terms of how connected they are, how dense is the forest in that part of in that neck of the woods. Countries are a set of firms that produce some of these products. They're like a set of monkeys that live in some of these trees. Okay, so we can look at a country and ask, where do you have your monkeys? And I'm from Venezuela, and that's where Venezuela has its monkeys. It has very few monkeys, and they're all pretty much in this, barren periphery. If you look at Malaysia, they have many, many more monkeys, and many more monkeys in more dense parts of the product space. This is, for example, the electronics sector. We can look at monkeys jumping over time, and this is a movie of the Malaysian monkey starting in 1965, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, 2000, 2010. You see that these monkeys are moving in this forest, but they're not moving randomly. They tend to move towards nearby products. So looking at the world in this way, you tell a story that is quite different from the standard story that you would have otherwise told. For example, if you were to compare Ghana to Thailand, well, these two countries in 1962 started at roughly the same level of income. If you compare how much they invested in education, Ghana did more in education than did Thailand. So more education, English is the lingua franca of the world, so you would guess Ghana beats the hell out of Thailand, obviously, right? Well, if you look at what Ghana knew how to do in 1962, this is what they know how to do. If you look at what Ghana is doing today, this is what they know how to do. So you see, they've changed a little bit, manotropo, okay? And this is the evolution of their exports. And this is where Ghanaian monkeys were in 1962. This is where they're now. They moved a little bit, manotropo, okay? If you look at Thailand in 1962 looked a little bit like Ghana. It had rice, corn, etc., vegetables, and some minerals. And if you look at Thailand in 2010, all of this is electronics. All of this is machinery and stuff. It has totally transformed its production capabilities. With less education, radical transformation of what it is that they're able to produce. This is where Thailand was in 1962. This is where they're now. A massive move in the product space into a much more diversified set of things that they're able to do. And as a consequence, Thailand is now 6 times richer than Ghana. Okay? So the dynamics of development are not happening through the standard ideas that we had of education, urbanization, fertility control, etc. It's happening through another angle that we're just trying to uncover. So collective knowledge travels through very narrow channels that we're just trying to understand. And so I'm going to leave you with this picture. That is, what we're trying to do is understand what it is that is driving this substance that is the secret of development. Let me stop there. Maybe take a couple of questions and then I'll pass it on to Marcela. Yes.
You said that you have invested more in education than Thailand.
Yeah.
It's not about quality. It's invest a lot.
Yeah.
Like Brazil, we have a universal.
Like all the children above 7 years old are in school, but the quality is really low. Nobody's learning anything.
It is not something. What I'm arguing is that the story I'm telling. By the way, I'm in the education business. I'm in favor of more education, right? It's good for my business. But having said that, you cannot explain the phenomena we're trying to explain by differences in quality of education. So it's something that is happening beyond quality of education. It's something else. And it's a know-how, you can graduate from a very good high school. That doesn't make you know how to make shoes, right? So the skills that go into an economic activity are acquired typically in the economic activity. They're not acquired in school, or they're very hard to acquire in school. So pushing just on the school, it doesn't get the transformation you expect, and that's in essence the experience of the world. Yes?
What role is government and good governance playing in your assessment?
Well, I think, in part, I think good governance the way I think of government is that government is the provider of some of these letters. So if the government doesn't provide some of these letters, a bunch of words will not be feasible, right? And so that's how I think of government in this framework. But now government is a provider of letters. For example, good governance must have some kind of more precision. What do we mean by good governance? If you mean, as Adam Smith said, peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice, I would say that with that, you don't get phytosanitary permits. With that, you don't get property rights on the radio waves. With that, you don't get a lot of stuff that an economy needs. So a government has to be a provider of much more stuff than just these simple things. And we have to better understand what that is. We are actually in a deep project trying to map out, just as we did the product space, to map out the government space. What it is that governments do in great detail to try to understand what are the missing letters in a particular context that might trigger the appearance of a bunch of new words and longer words and so on. Yes, Gustavo.
What about the role of capital or access to capital? You can't do anything, you can't jump if you don't have the money to do so.
Very good question. We looked into this, and so the question was, in that picture I showed you with a tractor and so on, we'd say, well, the guys with the tractor have capital, the other guys on the other side don't have capital, so if you just gave them the capital, they will buy what they need. That assumes, in some sense, that markets are complete, that in the village where these people live, there's a market for credit, there's a market for seeds, there's a market for agrochemicals, that they can actually sell their product out of the village, and consequently get enough money to pay for all the inputs that they use. So what I would put to you is that if capital was the problem, this problem would not have persisted for 200 years, because capital moves much faster than this 200-year gap. So something else must be preventing capital from being effectively deployed. And I would put that to be this missing know-how, that you could not just replicate the ecosystem behind the Kansas farming in a different setting, because there's just too many missing letters. It's just a tree that's too far away for the monkey to jump. Yes?
Would you slightly change your answer on education if that included professional schools? I'm referring to the tradition in Italy and Germany of professional schools that are, in my opinion, like key to transfer some of the, tacit know-how.
Yeah. Well, I think that in our story, the bulk of the skills are acquired on the job. So in some sense, firms are co-producers of skills with the government. And we have a whole interesting agenda to explore how it is that we're going to use the employment experience as part of the educational experience, as part of the accumulation of those skills. Obviously, you can only have experience in industries that exist in your country. So how do you get experience on industries that don't exist in your country? And since the process of development is the process of acquiring experience in things that you don't do yet, how does it happen? So we have a very interesting sequence of papers. One's by Danny Bahar, who's graduating, and Frank Nefke, who's somewhere, where they've looked at this question: how do pioneer firms in Germany, where do they get their workers? Well, they don't get them from the technical school. They get them from another firm in a city where that industry already exists, a worker that has experience in that industry. So even within Germany, know-how moves when the brains with the know-how move. Okay? Danny has a very interesting paper showing that you become good at the products that your immigrants are good at. Okay? We have another paper that shows that you become good at the products that your neighbors are good at. That know-how diffuses through these very narrow and weird channels. And the more we understand about those channels, the more we'll be able to unlock them and create better potential. Yes?
Hi. As you know, Nigeria has just overtaken South Africa in GDP. And I just used your atlas to look up and compare South Africa in terms of export, import, Nigeria. And it just like the penny drops. It is so powerful.
Yes, yes. Well, Nigeria is a country where oil is 95% of their exports, and it's not because they have a lot of it. They have a 16th of the oil that Saudi Arabia has. They have a 33rd of the oil that Norway has per capita. They have amazingly little oil, but it's the only thing they export. I mean, it's the only thing they know how to sell abroad, which means that the reason why they don't export other things is simply because they don't have the capabilities to do so. And that's why they're so poor. Now, the bad thing about Nigeria is that it's very hard for them to keep production stable. It's falling. But population is growing at 2% and a bit. So exports of oil per capita are going to fall because capitas are going up and because domestic consumption of oil is going up. So in some sense, the future of Nigeria looks much more compromised than the present of Nigeria. So people have been very excited about Nigeria since the price of oil went up. And it's essentially the increase in the price of oil that explains the recent boom. It's not a long-run phenomenon. But I'm going to stop here because Marcela, where's Marcela?
Here.
Marcela is going to show us how you can do these analyses yourself by playing around with the kinds of tools we have been trying to develop to sort of bring the theory to practical use. Marcela.
Thank you. And thank you guys for being the brave ones to be willing to be put to work during your lunch hour. But we promise that this is going to be fun. And we study poverty, but we believe in incentives and competition. So we'll have a very cool prize to the table that wins this little exercise. If you met your partners and you want to switch tables now, this is the moment. So I'll explain the exercise in a bit, but before, I want to do a quick intro on this online atlas, which is going to be helpful for your exercise, but hopefully beyond. That's going to be something that you use after. So, what is the online atlas? This is an online platform that we created that uses massive amounts of data, mostly trade data, and a lot of our theories on economic complexity, and makes them available widely in a hopefully easy to understand way. And you can answer some very simple questions like, what products get exported by which countries. You can do that through time. We have 50 years of data on how trade has progressed. And there's another set of applications that have to do with the product space, where you can start to think about which industries are likely to emerge in your countries. And that can help users kind of chart a path toward diversification. So I'm going to give you some quick examples of this in action. Like, if you have a simple question, like, who's the largest exporter of chocolate? Any ideas? Belgium, Brazil, Switzerland. Anybody else? Ivory Coast, Ghana, come handy when you're looking for a vacation spot. Yeah, it's actually Germany. We usually get a lot of Ghana and whatnot. And what this visualization is, which you can get in the online atlas, is it's a tree map where all of the chocolate exported in 2012, which is 23 billion, is the whole area, and the 16% is the area for Germany. So we can also answer more dynamic questions, like what is going on with a certain industry. So for example, if we choose a random industry like the flower industry in the Netherlands, and we wanted to understand what are the prospects of this industry, how is it doing, is it an interesting investment opportunity? Who here would invest in flowers in the Netherlands? All right. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see what the online atlas can tell us about this. And we're going to do it live so you can see how you would go ahead and and look through the atlas. So you'd go to Explore, corner, this is the home page, and you would choose your country of interest in the upper left corner here. And what you would get, and you type Netherlands, is this first visualization of what does the Netherlands export in the latest year we have, 2012. How big is flowers? The flower is less than 1% of the total exports of the Netherlands. It's part of a bigger cluster of fresh products. Once you can produce, export fresh flowers, you can produce a bunch of other fresh things. Now that 1%, let's look at how big is that in the world market of flowers. Actually 47%, dominated by the Netherlands. Now, let's look at who is buying flowers. Which are the customers for the Netherlands? Germany, rich countries, the US, Japan. Great. Now let's look at how the Netherlands is doing in these big markets. Like in Germany, how many of the flowers imported by Germany come from the Netherlands? 90%. Now has this always been the case? So let's look at it through time by looking at the stacked graph. And we see that in the last 20 years, yes, the Netherlands has actually been 95% of the market. Seems pretty good, pretty impressive. All right, let's look at other markets. I'd invest there. And we look here at the United States. We type flower market, and again, we can see where the US gets its flowers. It's been growing a lot in the last 20 years, and Netherlands is getting edged off by Colombia and Ecuador. All right, not so cool anymore. How about Japan? Japan is a big market. And again, we type Japan, flower market, stacked graph. It's a market that's been growing a ton, and there we see that Netherlands has totally been edged off by East Asian competitors. So in 2 minutes, you've got a picture of how this industry is doing, of where the risk might be coming from, etc. And yeah, exactly. And then there's a set of other applications that have to do with the product space. And Ricardo explained the product space, but this is basically a network of products, right? Here we have garments, textiles, and this becomes a map of capabilities. Because if you are a country that exports pants for men, which is one of these circles, and in the history of the world, countries that export pants for men are also likely to export pants for women, then these two nodes tend to be close together. But if countries that export pants for men, not usually exporting microwaves, then these nodes tend to be far apart. And as Ricardo said, we like to think about this as a forest. Your firms are monkeys. And if the secret to growth is about diversifying and expanding your know-how, you want your monkeys to take over this forest, right? So it matters that there are some dense areas in the product space where your monkeys can jump faster, and some peripheral areas where it's harder for your monkeys to jump. Right? So you are going to get this picture, and this will become important for your exercise. You'll get a country. In this case, this country is Spain. And what makes this picture a picture of Spain is that everybody shares the same product space, but here you have colored circles in the products that Spain exports with significance. And the less colored nodes are the ones that currently Spain is not in these markets. And what you can infer if we zoom in is that if Spain is producing motor vehicles for the transport of goods and services, then if it wanted to get into this product over here, which is harvesting and threshing machines, then it would be likely to succeed in that product because it shares a lot of the capabilities that are already in this neighborhood. And the shape of this matter, as Ricardo said, matters. Because if the product space, once we had mapped the world, was very homogeneous, and every node was equidistant from each other, had the same distance, then the answer to the development challenge, like how countries get rich, would just be a matter of time, right? Your monkeys would just jump and eventually take over the forest. But if it has this shape, it means that if you're stuck up here, it's harder for you to grow. It's harder for you to diversify than if you are in the center. And through this, we can make predictions of which countries we think are going to grow faster than others based on where you are in the product space. So to give you an example, let's think about Mexico and Chile. Two countries that are very similar in GDP per capita, in the news a lot. Who here would put its bet on Mexico versus Chile as a country that is growing, exciting, couple people? How about Chile? Right, why Chile?
They have more, less stratification of society and skills, more clusters.
More equal, more better education clusters. Other people like Chile?
More complexity in the products.
Complexity in the products?
Higher value added.
Higher value add? Yeah?
Why is it very more dependent on like copper exports versus Mexico, which seems more diversified? I guess my question, when I was here at Kennedy School, it was always about institutions. If I think about from an institution standpoint, Chile has much better institutions than Mexico.
Right, has great governance, right? Compared to Mexico, we hear about drug war or whatnot. Well, if you look at the product space as a way to answer that question, we would say that actually Mexico looks a lot more resilient and has higher potential to growth because it has managed to be in parts of the product space that are denser. So it's easier for their monkeys to grow. Chile, which has done very well in some products, like copper over here, salmon exports, agricultural products, and their products have done great, but they still have been in the periphery. So I'll show you a little video of how the monkeys have jumped in these environments, and you can see how Mexico has entered the center, and Chile, through time, has grown, but has been unable to enter to dense areas of the forest through time. And I mean, the point that this makes is that it's not that these countries don't have very successful clusters, but if something happened to the industry of salmon in Chile, then where would they jump? Where would those monkeys jump to? Those capabilities are not easily redeployable to other industries like traps, right? Because there's no traps. Well, if something happened to the toaster oven industry in Mexico, they have the capabilities to jump into a bunch of other products that share those capabilities. So in our worldview, we would say that just Chile looks like a more fragile economy looking forward because it hasn't managed to be in industries where that have skills and capabilities that can be easily redeployable. As you are choosing products, so the products in which your economy should diversify into, something else that you can do in the product space is look at the connectivity of the products. If you hover over in the online atlas into any of these products, you'll get to see which products tend to be connected to other ones. So for example, if you attract investment on the car industry into your country, then that shares capabilities with a bunch of other industries that are likely to emerge. Car parts, plastics, and if car parts enters your country, then a bunch of other industries become possible. So as you're thinking of the diversification question, cars will become more interesting than another complex product like telephones that is complex but has less of these synergies. And the last visualization I wanted to show you that will be helpful for your exercise, something you can do in the diversification apps, which is a 2x2, where it puts every potential product near your specific economy. And this one is Guatemala, where you see every product, every node is a product, and measured by the distance, which is how easy will that product be for you to move into, because it's how close to your current productive structure, and how complex it is, and you want to move into higher complexity. And in this case, the average complexity of Guatemalan products is like -3. So any of these products become interesting, but this one, refrigerators and freezers, is something that is still close enough so your monkeys can jump into, but and increases your complexity significantly. So before I tell you about the exercise, I wanted to share one last example. And this was a little bit of an exercise that we used with the fellows to see if the atlas can tell you something useful about something that you might care about today, or something you're hearing in the news. And this was a little bit of a challenge for us to think about, for example, the Ukraine. You know, we're all bombarded in the news about the political tug of war and the decision between, you know, Russia and the EU, and whether Ukraine should go to the east or to the west. So we looked at two countries that are neighbors that went in different directions. Belarus, decidedly to the east, and Poland that went decidedly to the west, to see what might be in store for Ukraine in these two channels, or these two options. What we see is that Ukraine, lackluster performance, hasn't made up its mind, and hasn't grown at all in the last 20 years. Belarus, on the other side, who became, you know, a union state with Russia, no tariffs, kind of had a dip. It's a little more volatile, but it grew with its partner in Russia. But Poland did much better, starting at a similar place. Definitely went west, you know, joined NATO, became member of the EU, and has had interesting growth. All right. We click into Poland, we see that it has, you know, had very dramatic growth in exports. It went 1,000 exports per capita to 4,000, and it did that in a very diversified way. You know, lots of interesting products, machinery, transportation, in the middle of the product space. Compared to Belarus, who also grew, but almost half of that growth was in mineral products, oil, exporting to mostly Russia, where it got a lot of that volatility. It's been a bumpier road. And we see that a lot of that bumpiness came from Russia. Over 1/3 of Belarus's exports go to Russia in oil, and it has inherited a lot of that volatility. Compared to Poland, that it has diversified in its export basket to a bunch of Western European countries. Great. Seems like an obvious choice. It's going to be a much happier growth, you know, higher growth if it goes toward the west. Well, if we click a little more, we see that Ukraine's exports in 1992 actually look very similar to Belarus's exports. And actually not similar at all, which are very simple, right? Minerals, crude materials, chemicals, same colors. But Poland's in 1990 was already much different. It was producing manufacturing products, was producing machinery and electronics. And if we look at where it was selling to, Ukraine today sells 1/3 of its production to Russia, which is similar to where Belarus has, you know, even more to the Eastern Bloc. But if you look at Poland, in 1989, 20 years ago, it already was selling to the European markets. Russia was not even part of that. So it was much easier for Poland to look into the EU and have, you know, an easier time transitioning into those markets, because it already was exporting to those markets. So right now, Ukraine exports most of its sophisticated products to Russia, machinery and you know, transportation, and its simple products to Europe. So if we think about, you know, its product space, sophisticated things go to Russia, simple things go to the EU. So when we think of the Ukraine, if the Ukraine got to be shut off of the Russian market, most of its sophisticated industries would probably be decimated, because they cannot compete in the EU now. So, but it would be a much more painful transition than it was for Poland. So it's a way to see that, you know, this choice is not just an ideological, it's a very real choice. But anyway, with that, we're going to go into our tables to do the exercise. And the exercise is that you have to pretend that you are the Minister of Industry in a country X. And you're having a nice meeting with your advisors, and the president comes in and says, in half an hour, there's a very influential group of investors that's coming, and you have to pitch an investment opportunity to them. You have to pitch a product that you think is likely to succeed in your country, and that, of course, that's going to increase your complexity and jobs and growth, etc. And you will have a computer and a fellow to help you through this question. And you're competing with other countries who are also going to be pitching to these investors. And a couple of you will be asked to present what product you will choose. And any question that you have, your fellow in your table will help you answer. So see you in half an hour. Thanks. to hear from two groups, one of them Malaysia, one of them Romania, as a pitch to the investors that have come in. And then we will get together, decide a winner, and the winner gets a small prize to take home. A big prize, actually, sorry. All right, so this group is going to pitch to which country? Romania. In Romania. Okay, the investors are here, and you're the Minister of Industry.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're from the whatever division of Romania, and we are going to present to you our idea of what we would like to expand our industry into. A little bit about Romania. We have a very large export market, a market that we export to in electrical materials and transportation. Those are the two basic exports that we have, which predominantly in our export market. And we sell to the European market. So we already have these connections with the market. That's who our customers are. The biggest buyer is Germany from us. So what we would like to do is produce electrical transformers. And these would be for electrical cars. Now, how did we, do you want me to go ahead and how did we arrive at this decision? Okay, so we looked at our product space, and in the transportation area, which is where we're pretty big, we found products which are pretty much at the same distance from, in terms of technology, technological know-how, our people have the knowledge. However, in terms of complexity, if we go into these electrical transformers, we will increase the complexity within the country by 2 points compared to the first product we looked at was 1.78. This product that we're looking at is 2.35. We believe that for the long run, the complexity and know-how that we're going to produce will be an investment. So this is why we're doing it. Now, I have an expert here who knows everything about electrical motors, and he can tell you where we're going in for the future. So here, thank you.
Yeah, and I work also for the Romanian government. Thank you for having us. I was the other day in California, and we had the chance to meet. Well, what I was trying to tell you is this. So we really believe in environmentally friendly, sustainable transportation. And you as investors hopefully understand that this is the way the future will develop. And hopefully, you realize this is something for the long term. It's not something that happens, overnight, like the revolution in Egypt. This is something that takes time. But I want to give you 3 reasons why we think the electric car industry is going to transform the transportation industry as a whole, and then why that makes sense then to invest in us, who can basically supply to that ongoing trend. So the first reason is, basically with electric cars and solar energy, you can have a system whereby basically transportation is free, where you don't have to buy gasoline, and it's where you charge your iPhone, and you're going to charge your car. So that's the thing that is very compelling, and that's going to unravel over the next few years. And then also, it's very environmental friendly. So we live in a society now where everybody's sensitive about these issues, where everybody talks about global warming, and so the electric car industry is really, helping to make these things more sustainable. And then lastly, all these issues that people are talking about, like range issues and all these other things, these are really not issues, because we have the smartest people working on battery problems and all these things. And so, in a few years, hopefully, when people realize this is like something that's more sustainable than the gasoline industry, people will catch on, and you'll be glad to join us early on, before everybody else does.
And now, we need a volunteer for Malaysia. Which of the tables in Malaysia would like? Great. Come on, you've got 2 minutes. And then all the fellows here so we can choose a winner.
Okay, hi, I'm Marcela Escobari MPP from
No, the
2004.
Minister of...
I'm the Minister of what? Oh, I'm the Minister of Industry from Malaysia, though I've never been there. So this is a good testament to what you can learn from this tool, even if you don't know the country in depth. So we looked at Malaysia. If we look at our current export market, the vast majority, or at least over 50%, is to Asia. The biggest partners being Singapore, China, Japan, which is about 36%. And so then a lesser part, there's about 10% to Europe, 10% to US, and lesser to other countries. So the dominant export partner is our Asian countries. As for what we export is electronics, primarily integrated circuits, as well as some boilers and some even nuclear reactors. And then the secondary is petroleum, oil products, and third is palm oil. So we looked at the tool and tried to identify what group balances increasing complexity. So how can we better approach the export market? And that was machinery, electrical. So, but that, as we said before, was actually what we knew was the biggest export product that we had. So we looked even more in depth to say, well, what product can we best export? And we decided on liquid crystal devices. So basically, if we look at liquid crystal devices, so if you think about Malaysia, and we think about a computer. So before they did integrated circuits, which is like the desktop, the laptop, and liquid crystal devices is doing much more the screen, and doing so for iPhones and things like that. So that's a feasible jump. The tool says, and you can think about it, it's a feasible jump from going from the board itself to the screen. And we also know, given everyone has an iPhone in the world, and it's going to continue to have one, that it's a growing market. So we identified that as a great market for Malaysia to get into. Not only is it a growing market, it's a very big market with $46 billion, at which Malaysia controls less than 1% of that market. So if they just get a few percentage point increase, they'll really increase the export and the whole GDP of Malaysia. That's it.
Okay, so now all the fellows go out there with me to decide the winner while Ricardo closes our session today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Well, let me tell you, what you've seen and what you've experienced is work in progress. We keep on working to improve our tools, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about coming attractions. Okay, so the next thing that we're working on is to do the same thing at the subnational level. So you'll be able to look not at countries, but at cities, counties, and we're working with the government of Mexico, and we're working with the government of Colombia to do this at the national level, to look at localities. Because the activity, as I showed you with the example from Mexico, is that development, this know-how is not just equally spread throughout the country. It conglomerates in some parts of the country and not in others. So we're going to do that. We are also looking at skills. We are trying to zoom in to the kinds of occupations that industries need, to where these occupations, how are they generated, how far is the labor force of a certain locality from the needs of a particular industry, and what would it take to get it where for that industry to be viable. And that should be a tool that training services and so on might find extremely useful, or even recruitment services. We also want to include quality. There's things, cars that sell for $2,000 and cars that sell for $200,000. So we want to know a little bit about quality. So one of the, on the next version of the Atlas, we're going to add measures of quality to the export, not just how much you export, but what's the quality of your export. And we're also going to include some estimate of missing places where you should be exporting your current products that you are not currently exporting. So destinations that appear like accessible to you. So how can you expand not the diversity of your products, but also the diversity of your destinations? Which ones are more appropriate? So that's a work in progress. And all of this is happening because we've created a group of sponsors for this effort. And I want to thank all of our sponsors that are making this work feasible, and we hope to increase our sponsorship. Well, and with that, let me ask Marcela, who's after a long deliberation.
Very difficult, but in the end, for like strategic decisions and enthusiasm, we ended up with Romania. And Romania gets to go from wherever home is with a huge book on economic complexity, where you have every country you ever wanted to know about is here, and it looks really pretty. So congratulations. Thank you so much for doing this with us. Thanks.